Pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, roll call. Councilor Cody.
Here.
Councilor Grass.
Here.
Councilor Rochelle.
Here.
Councilor Lunt.
Here.
Councilor Mason.
Here.
Councilor Pomelo.
Here.
And Councilor Bowie is here. Okay, Twyla, first item, please.
We have nothing under public hearings. Under consent agenda, Order 2010-11, to approve the minutes of December 15, 2010.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of December 15th.
I'll second that.
I have a motion from Councilor Rochelle, a second from Councilor Pomelo. All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Okay, next item.
Under council orders, resolutions, and ordinances, Order 2010-12, school general obligation bond public hearing.
Good evening.
Is it changed?
What Tracy is distributing tonight is just a copy of the impact to revenues and expenditures, which is part of the process. What I would like to do is just provide you with some information, background information for those of you that were unable to attend our informational meeting in regard to this proposal. As a result of the Facilities Committee, we've been meeting since July. The Facilities Committee, which is comprised of the Budget Advisory, members of the Budget Advisory, Town Council, School Committee, and public community members. We have made some recommendations based on our NEASC report and concerns that were identified in this report. One of the things, or one of the recommendations, was to do a new versus reno analysis. For those people that were at the facilities, or at the informational meeting, you'll know that the engineers did determine that the building could be renovated. And as a result, the Facilities Committee turned around and said, well, let's look at what we have for money in the budget and what we can do for renovations with that existing money. The majority of the funds that we have used over the last year have been stimulus funds. And we have used, to date, I think a little over $50,000. We have an outline of all the expenditures that we have spent. We also have the remaining amount of stimulus money that we have available. What we would like to do, or what we proposed, or to you and to the Community Budget Advisory and School Committee, is to use existing money that we have in our budget in the amount of, if you look under the bond proposal, we have money that we use for the portable lease, which is $25,100. And then we have an expiring bond that we paid off this year for $24,852. What we'd like to do is use that existing money. We calculated how much of a bond that we could get with $49,952 and came up with around $350,000. As a Facilities Committee, we met and we discussed what we could get now, and we felt that by looking at the priorities, we could get more out of $350,000 now versus $49,000 a year over the next few years. The priorities, the engineers did some priorities, and the Facilities Committee put together a list of short-term, long-term goals. The main priority is to change the main entrance to the high school to make it handicap accessible. Right now, currently, the main entrance to the high school is not secure, it's not well monitored, and it's not handicap accessible. Those who need to enter the building after hours usually have to call and make appointments. We felt that with the money that we have available and using some ADA funds that we have budgeted this year and what we could use for next year, that we would be able to change the main entrance of the building. And the engineers are working on some drafts of what that would look like. The other piece is they said that if you're going to change the main entrance of the building, At the same time, you're going to be putting, an entrance on the front side or the north side of the building, that you would want to probably update the siding and the windows, which is part of the long-term, but also short-term, if you did it in stages. And we felt that those two, the Facilities Committee recommended to the school committee that those were our first priorities, and that in that order, that's what we'd like to attempt to renovate on the high school first. The gymnasium roof, because of the loss of energy, because we're heating and reheating air that escapes through that roof. The engineers are looking at what that would look like if we did redo the roof on that, add insulation. The one piece that they're still investigating is whether or not, if there's no heat escaping through the roof, that we'd have to make sure that the roof was strong enough to hold a lot of snow. And so they're still doing that research. The roof has been the roof has had some additional supports added over the years, but the engineers, I believe they felt it was going to be structurally sound, but they're still trying to determine that. As members of the Facilities Committee who are here can attest, is that there are obviously there are a number of renovations that could be done. We have a list of short-term priorities. We felt that right now the market, at least on bids for contractors, is really competitive, and you can get a lot more for your money right now versus waiting. So that's why we are going to you and requesting that we use that money to go out to a bond and try to get as much done to the high school as we can. This also means, for those who may have questions, this also means moving the guidance and administrative offices from the second floor down to the bottom floor where the main entrance is, so that when people can come in, they would have their options. There'd be a receptionist there. We'd be able to really control people going in and out of the building. We'd be removing the portables, so that side of the building and all those doors would be locked throughout the school day. There'd be one main entrance to the building, and that is, and then the other piece would be to move the art room from underneath the gymnasium to the classroom located next to the existing art room. So using our stimulus money, using existing budgeted money, and hopefully with the bond, we should be able to get a pretty good chunk of that done for the next school year. Tracy, I'm not sure if there's anything. Oh. So some of you may have some questions.
Questions from council?
On the back, I don't think I mentioned, but on the back of that handout is a timeline, proposed timeline for our bond proposal.
May I-
He asked? Oh,
Sure.
I think they're aware. It's the New England Schools of Colleges.
Being on the committee, it'd be nice for you to explain that the list of concerns that they had. I mean, with the facilities recommendations move forward with this, it's not just taking one or two of the concerns. I mean, most likely we'll be addressing probably, 60 to 70% of the concerns they had with doing the upgrades that we hope to do with the monies.
Yeah, I think that the Facilities Committee has done a really nice job of looking at the concerns that were identified in the NEASC report, and we feel that the gym obviously is probably the last piece, the biggest piece, but it really can't be renovated, just the way it's designed and it's built. But by moving the art room, I feel that is, or the committee and myself feel that that's probably the last real big piece. And by using the money to do all this, secure the building, move the art room, probably it may not get us off probation, but we're pretty confident that we would not lose our accreditation. And that was our ultimate goal.
Any other questions from council? I have maybe a couple. Looking at your schedule, right, because what's before us tonight is to post a public hearing, right, which is being requested for February 2nd, correct?
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, and I'm looking more for council's opinion, the schedule that's laid out here says that we would have a public hearing on February 2nd, And then we would also take our final action on February 2nd, which means, at least in my mind, you don't have a lot of time to take in everything that the public had given you before you have to make a final decision on whether or not we're going to go to bond. I did some research, and last year, we actually held our election for the bond, for last year's bond, in April. It was on April 21st, which was still in support of telling the bond council that we would go forward with a bond. We submit all the applications and everything like we were going forward in February. And then based on the vote, we then told them the next day or two that they could, that we were going to go forward with that application and not to pull it back. So they would go out to bond all the money with everybody else that had applied for bonds with municipality approval. So I'm just wondering from council, do you feel you would like some time to deliberate between the public hearing and when you actually have to take a final action?
I guess my question would be is, sticking to the February 2nd, does that allow the bond to be put through quicker than it would be if you actually waited, or is there just a certain time frame when that bond would be going through?
The bond's going to go to bond council and go out for their, I believe they go out and get interest rates and stuff like that, and
Well, the application
all the money.
has to be in by February 7th.
Right.
So that's all has to be at the bond bank. And then, once the bond bank has that, they will, they don't set the rates until, it won't be until after this, because they have to sell the bonds, and you won't really know what the interest rates are, is my understanding how it works. So, but there is a deadline that the bond bank needs to have the question answered if you're going to move forward or not. And I'd have to look at my bond. You know that schedule?
Kathy's not here this evening, but there is a schedule, and I believe that this schedule was created to meet all those deadlines. I don't have the bond bank schedule, but I do know that we have been provided that information, and she's been researching it. So I'm assuming that we created this schedule to try to keep in line with that time frame.
Right, I'm just wondering if there's an extra week or so that would allow council some time to digest everything and then come to, even if we had to call another special meeting to meet all the schedules, that would allow you the opportunity to digest stuff before you actually made your final vote. And if council doesn't want to do that, that's fine. I'm just throwing that out there based on the schedule. I know council sometimes doesn't like to be given a bunch of information and then have to react at that moment on it. They like to have some time to digest it.
If the information is due to the bond bank by February 7th, that's a Sunday, so it would really be due by Friday, the 5th, at close of business.
Right, but the bond application, you can submit all the bond applications you want. What the bond bank needs to know, based on all those applications that are submitted, is by, and I believe it's towards the end of April, whether or not you're committed to go forward with that request, that application.
Answer from the election.
So they don't go out to price until the 26th or the 27th of April.
I guess my concern would be is just if it is going to hold back any time frame as far as I realize we're not going to have a final determination until it actually goes to vote. I mean, that's going to be the final determination regardless of what we actually say yes or no on, which it should be. But I myself feel that the information that, of course, I have a little bit more information on it, so I mean, I don't think the information as far as what we're going to be looking at is going to change. It all depends what there is for a comment. Going through the meeting the other night, there was well over 100 people that attended, and there was 99.9% all people in favor of moving forward with it. So after sitting through that meeting, I don't assume that there's going to be many different opinions, but they may. I would have no problem actually voting on it on the February 2nd, but I would leave that up to everybody else.
I will echo what Fern said. I was at that meeting, and I was very impressed with the committee and what they proposed, and the public certainly, from what I could tell, was well on board with it, and
Yeah.
as long as we're not going
Okay.
to hold it up, let's move
So,
forward if we can.
I mean, I just want to give council the opportunity, that's all. I don't want,
I just want to say that since the informational meeting, I have not received any feedback, based on the surveys that we handed out. The two questions that people asked were, why is the north side of the building a priority? Because they thought it was the siding, but it's really the main entrance is the main priority on that north side. And the other piece is, what does a renovated building look like? They want to see the big picture. And the engineers just they're not ready for that yet. Those were the questions that kind of came up that night, and those are the questions I was approached with after the meeting. But there hasn't been, again, as Mr. LaRochelle said, there hasn't been a lot of, didn't seem to be too many comments from the community in regard to the questions about the bond proposal.
and this approach, based on your educational needs, buys you 5 or 6 years based on your current student population with your reshuffling of classes and everything, before some additional space may be required?
Yeah, that question actually came up, is that if you get rid of the portables, what do you do internally? We would have staff share classrooms. We currently do that with at least 2 members of the staff. It would be potential, obviously additional. Band and chorus, which is one of the portables, the 2 classrooms would be moved to the stage area in the gym. So that would take care of at least 1 portable. We'd have to find space for 2 other classrooms, and we would have to look at scheduling. That same question was brought up tonight at the budget advisory meeting, and I explained it the same way, is that we feel that the savings of $25,000 a year on the portables is well worth, considering what we're going to get, is worth the inconvenience of having some members of staff having to share a classroom. And it's just a scheduling piece. They just may teach in multiple classrooms, but that's nothing that we haven't already done. Yep.
This probably won't be a popular move with NEASC, asking additional staff to share, but I think the committee, I share, I can explain that the committee feels that it's something that we have to do in order to move forward and move upward in a timeline with short-term and long-term goals. It'll be a little bit of pain in the beginning, but we'll get there.
The 6 years that you were talking about, for those that may not know, we anticipate an enrollment spike, or at least if numbers stay the same. The 5th grade class, ever since we built LCS, the kindergarten classes that have been coming in have been, right around 100, if not more. And the 5th graders, when they're juniors, that would be when we would, we'll have to look, if numbers stay the same or increase, that's when we'd have some space issues. And that was brought up to the facilities committee and school committee and budget advisory this evening. So we anticipate, if numbers stay the same, that it would be about 6 years, and then we would have to relook at, and hopefully by then we would have our application, build an application in, and part of that renovation is a 4-room addition onto the existing, the new portion. So we figured we would have the state pay for that, hopefully, and use the money that we have for other things.
Sure.
And just one thing to add, one of the things that we have heard, and even with in the committee listening, has been a lot of people say, well, why haven't a lot of things been done in the past? Well, this is our moving forward, and this is the start of doing something. So hopefully people are on board, and they can actually, if this goes through, see some changes with the north side of the building. Something when you drive by, you'll actually be able to see change being done. So if people ask for something to happen, this is the start of it, and hopefully people support it. And living within our means and kind of pay as you go, and this is all done with monies that are already there, and not asking for any over and beyond what's already there. So, that's pretty impressive. There will be some sacrifice of, it's not all done easily. The school is definitely working hard to make this happen, so give them credit for that.
And I also noticed in your bond schedule that you really don't even need the 49,000 the first year, right? It's actually not until you're, not this,
Be the following.
right, not this upcoming fiscal budget, but the one after that.
11, 12.
Right, 11, 12 is when you actually need that money. Any other questions from council? I would entertain a motion to set a public hearing for February 2nd.
I'll make that motion, Mike.
I have a motion from Councilor Cody, a second from Councilor Crafts. That was going to be my next question. Is that a public hearing we want to have here? Or do we want to have that public hearing at maybe the high school or something?
I would recommend the high school, just because we
Okay.
had 100 and something people at the last
Because
meeting.
it's a normal meeting for the council, so we would use your facility to do the public hearing. We could
Yep.
host that at, say, 6 o'clock or something like that.
Okay.
And then we could directly go into our meeting from there. We'll try to make it a light agenda so we don't keep everybody up at the school.
Yeah, I believe we already have it scheduled.
Okay. All right, so we will do that at the high school.
And you
think
said
that's
6
everything.
o'clock?
Excuse me?
6 PM public hearing?
Yep, I think 6 PM would be good. Give everybody a chance to get home from work and get out and have time to discuss everything. That seem reasonable to council?
That's good.
Good to me.
Okay. Any additional comments from council? Comments from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Order passed,
All right.
7-0.
Thank you. Okay, next item, please, Twyla.
Order 2010-13, Appeals Board resignation.
You have one appeals board resignation. Mr. Hewitt, he has resigned because he is relocating and will not be living in the state. I think he's moving to Florida, so that's effective.
So, council willing to make a motion to accept the resignation?
I'll make a motion to accept the resignation of Robert Aaron Hewitt.
A motion from Councilor Cody, a second from Councilor Rochelle. Further discussion? How many openings do we currently have on the appeals board?
Two.
Two.
This will be the second one.
This will be the second one, okay. So we'll continue to post
We
and,
need to post, and we're still looking for the assessing board. We have 4 currently, we need 5, and 2 alternates. Those have not been filled yet.
okay. Comments from the public? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Next item, please.
Order 2010-14, weatherization bids.
You had requested some more specific data along with, on the costs of these 2 proposals, plus certificate of liability insurance and some workman's comp. One of them provided that. The other one provided a update on the price because he had just given us an hourly rate. And I'm glad we did that because his price went through the roof, expensive. So the other gentleman did say that everything that he was doing would cover all the vents and bury it. So,
He said that, but he didn't put it in writing, right? He didn't adjust his,
he didn't change his price.
he didn't change his price, but he didn't put any wording in the contract that says he's gonna insulate the vents. Which I think is a key piece of the whole process.
You go by verbal.
I mean, I would feel comfortable if he actually was, if we were to, if prior to starting, if we do agree upon the price, that would, before he started, that would be in writing. I mean, I would, instead of holding this back any further,
I mean,
the idea, if we were to make a motion to accept it, that it would only be under the circumstances that he wrote his contract to actually represent exactly what needs to be done.
Let's do that.
I would be okay with that.
And what about a clause for warranty?
And he does have a warranty. Materials warranted by the manufacturer. That came with a brochure. And he gave, he said a 1 year,
Most of them are 1 year.
1 year. Yeah.
The only other, if I may?
Yes.
The only other thought I had was just where you actually mentioned there'd be a cost per square foot for debris and cleanup. Is he removing much from up there? or is
He's not
pretty-
removing anything.
Okay.
He's just blowing in 12 inches of insulation, and it's covering over some of the vent areas that we have proposed. He
Okay, so there really shouldn't be a whole lot of debris.
Shouldn't be, well.
Okay.
Right,
hopefully
but
not.
I think the way that's written, Fern, is that He's just telling us that this whole price is costed at 82 cents per square foot, not for the removal of debris.
Okay, that
The
was listed
removal of
on,
debris is just another
Another-
task
okay.
within his
Okay.
efforts, that whatever mess he makes, he's gonna clean up.
it
type
wasn't
deal.
listed as a different number, so I
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
thought
yeah,
that kind of
it
went
was-
along with it, so.
Yeah.
That's what he's charging us.
It looked like an unseen number, that's all. And
No.
from last time, we see the unseen numbers could actually equate to
Yes,
tens of thousands.
yes. So,
We want him to include language that it covers events.
that, right, I mean, and the reason I think we need to do that is because, I mean, Mr. Churchill's estimate went from about 16,000 and change to 29,000, so this individual's not changing his estimate from 17,315, and he's verbally telling us he's gonna do that. It seems like, I mean, Mr. Churchill's, I mean, they both probably know their work, but I don't know why one would go up, you
Well,
know.
because he gave us a quote of 6 inches, and when we told him we wanted to match it up to 12, it doubled.
Yeah.
Remember I said?
Right, yeah, he did move it, he did increase that to 12, yeah.
Exactly. We were getting half the
So that they're
install.
both,
Double
right.
material.
Okay, so we'll add that disclaimer into this contract and the warranty for 1 year.
Yep.
On his workmanship. And with that, council's okay of approving it at the 17,315, understanding those changes to the agreement.
And with the understanding, we still have the funds available for this. It's not new monies, it's money that we had.
No, it's money we
put aside.
budgeted for.
Would you like a motion?
Yes.
I'd like a motion that we accept the bid from D.D. Dyer for, I believe the dollar amount would not be changing, which would be the 17,315. And with understanding that the contract is changed to represent the idea of the complete work being done, insulating the venting and
Warranty.
warranty.
I'll second that, Mike.
I have a motion from Councilor Rochelle, a second from Councilor Cody. Any further discussion from council? Comments from the public? All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Okay, next item, please.
Order 2010-15, committee liaisons.
And last year, we changed and appointed members of the council to committees. You should have received this following the last meeting on the nights and times that all their committees meet.
Do we know which ones are open at this point in time, or which ones we looked at?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we can go through, like I can tell you, I'm representing the Technology Committee, the Commercial Revolving Loan Fund, and the one that's not on here is the Community Policing Advisory Group. Fern, I think you were on the Rec Committee?
Yep.
Yes.
Roger, I think, did the planning board.
I had the Board of Appeals.
Okay, so Roger has the Planning Board and the Board of Appeals.
Actually, I sit on the budget, but, no, actually, that's a different one. Never mind.
Which one?
Actually, the Audit Committee, I'm sorry. I was looking
All
at the
right,
wrong
you're on the Audit Committee, Fern?
one. Correct, yeah.
Okay, so Fern's on the Audit Committee. Do we have anybody on the Trails Commission? I don't think so. So the Trails Commission's open, the Water Commissioners is open. MTM Board?
I was on it, but I'm not, I was on the board, but I had resigned when I got elected.
Right, when you got elected, so that one's open. And then the School Committee's open. And,
I'll go back, when I can make it on that MDM board, but. if
It's during the day they meet, so it works out well, if somebody's around.
Yeah.
I'll put my name with School Committee because it's kind of following along with the Facilities
Okay.
Committee, so.
all right, so Fern's gonna take the School Committee.
I'll do the Trails Commission.
The Trails Commissions, Gina will take the Trails Commission. All right,
Town Council, I'll follow.
Yeah.
I think we all got that one. Library Governing Board, Conservation Commission, those are open.
I can take the governing board.
The governing board, okay, Lori. And the budget advisory board is open.
Do you really need one for that? They pretty much
Probably not.
discuss everything that you do.
They deal with the council pretty regularly.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah.
they do.
And then the ethics panel,
They only meet when,
Yeah, that's.
right, so I wouldn't necessarily think we need to have one
If
there.
you want.
I could do the Conservation Commission if that's on Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay, Mark? And,
Water Commissioner's the only one you have left?
right, because Dale said he was gonna do the MTM board when he could. So water commissioners and that's it. Anybody interested in the water commissioners?
I'll do it.
If you
Roger?
want to trade, I can take Planning Board if you want to do Water Commissioners.
you're also on the planning board, right? You won't see them?
Okay, so Roger said he would do the water commissioners. All right, great.
Do you want to take your name off one of the other ones and have Mark serve?
I can do Planning Board if you want, or,
Take the planning board.
okay.
Okay,
It's only for 3 years, I know what they do.
Yeah.
Pretty good idea.
Well, that's kind of, that's why I had taken the Board of Appeals. 'cause
Yeah,
they
Yeah, you
just
know what
come
they
off.
do, right, makes
Know your
sense.
way around.
all right, so we'll put Mark on the planning board.
We will,
That's
Great,
where I used to be.
yeah,
right.
we'll let every committee chairman know that these people have been volunteered to
Right.
liaisons, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Great.
And maybe you could just update this and give it back to council
Yep.
with our names on it. That'd be great.
Yep.
Okay,
Also, just while we're
Yeah.
talking about the audit committee and the facilities committee, I know the audit committee, possibly, there was 2 members from the council that were part of that, and there's one that's no longer. I'm not sure if there's, at some point in time, it doesn't need to be read off, that we just need to look at and make sure that we do have a second person and kind of roll with that this year, since there will be some changes in that area with,
Yeah.
yeah,
with finance change. Maybe it'd be nice to, when that new person comes aboard, to actually meet the audit committee and kind of make sure our direction's in the right way, so there's no confusion.
I'd be willing to participate in that.
Because I know last year, at the end of that, there was some questions about just really the functions of
Yep.
that committee, so.
Yep.
And the other one would be, I know I spoke to Lori also about the facilities committee with Norma going as a, as a citizen's role in that. Whether or not we need to have a second person officially put onto that, or if, I know the committee is going to be running to an end pretty soon, and there's going to be another committee taking over, but, I know, Lori, you mentioned one time that you'd be interested possibly in doing it, so I weren't sure if that would be what the council would want to do at this point in time to...
When do they meet? Do you meet it? Oh, they're gone.
Actually, the meeting tomorrow, I won't be able to be there tomorrow, that's... why I
During
was
the
men-
day or in the evenings?
It's in
At
the
night?
evening.
Okay.
What is the expectations, Mike, of the council to the members of these boards? Are we expected to be at every meeting?
No, I don't think it's at every meeting. I mean, I think the thought originally, when we started this a few years ago, was to just understand what the committee's doing, kind of try to participate a little bit, just listen in, see what's going. If you hear something of interest, you can report it back to council and help keep council up to date, because we don't always hear from committees every other meeting or whatever, so it's just kind of a way to kind of,
Improve communication.
right, keep our communications open with them, and, but, I mean, attending every meeting is not a requirement. I mean, there's none of that stuff there. It's just kind of do what you can and try to, if you can be supportive of them and try to give them some assistance. Sometimes they have questions come up that maybe we can bring back to Steve or something to try and get things going. So, I mean, it's just,
Basically be a liaison.
yeah, basically, yep. So did I hear Lori wanted to be on the facilities committee? Okay.
Yep.
All right. Good,
Awesome.
all right. We'll get that updated and back to everybody. Okay, next item, please.
Order 2010-16, set the tax rate.
Every year, the treasurer, state of Maine, sends out a recommended tax rate not to exceed whatever they give you. This year, it's 7%. I think last year, it was 9%, and you had set it at 7, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so, yep.
Yes, right, we've set it at 7 for the past couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Because it was 10%, I think, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Then it went to
9
9,
last year.
and both of those times we had set it to 7. And so now they're saying the max is 7, so not sure what council wants to do with this.
It's,
You want to entertain the 7%, or if people have other ideas?
Why did we go 7 when it was 9?
For many years, we always set it at whatever the state recommended. And then, I think, 2 years ago, we started, based on the way the economy was going and concern, that we would lower that slightly off from what the state was, because I think some of the councilors felt 10% was maybe too excessive for not paying your taxes on time. So that's when we agreed to set it at 7%. I actually think it was Councilor Kraft's idea and thoughts to go do that, so.
And
Under the circumstances and the times as hot as they are at this time, is that something we should be looking at to maybe lower it a couple points?
You certainly can. I will tell you, I mean, and I know the times and the situations, this is part of our revenue stream based on people who, right? And I think what we have to be careful of is that there are some people who can't pay it because of where they're at. I think if you look through the people who don't pay the taxes, there are also a very large number of people who can afford to pay their taxes, but they tend to hold off and be late, and you're just kind of giving them a free ride, and we've accounted for some of this revenue to help offset additional increases in our normal taxes.
and also, may I add to that also? And in years past, with some of the discussions was the idea that, I mean, we want to reward the people that do pay on time, and the people that can't for definite hardship actually come in and speak to the town, and we've always been able to waive or work with those interest rates. So it's not a definite, you're at a loss because you can't pay and it's going to cost you more. This is more set for the people to benefit the idea of paying on time and making sure that they are not using their money to make money somewhere else versus the idea of paying taxes. So I think the 7% is fairly fair. I mean, it's better than what it has been, compared when it was 10. But, and again, if there's someone with hardship and they come in and speak to Steve, we'll work with them.
Kathleen, yep.
And I'm not sure if we can do this or not, but I know in other states, I've seen this, like when my parents get their tax bill in Florida, right? It has like 4 payments, right? It says if you get it in October, it says if you pay it in November, it's one value. If you pay it in December, it's more. If you pay it in January, it's more, right? So I don't know if they've already accounted for this percentage in how they're saying what your tax bill will be, but it's like, if you pay early, you get a benefit, right? So I don't know if we could even think about, and I'm not suggesting we do that this year, but if we could think about saying, you know what, maybe if you paid, March 15th or in the month of March, right, you could get a 2 or 3% discount or something like that, right? And if you paid, the next month, then it might be a different number and kind of graduate it that way. I don't know, it's something to potentially think about, but.
I think if you use the revenue for that incentive, because you want more cash flow earlier.
Right, exactly.
Increase your cash flow.
Right.
And use the interest that you're collecting to give back and reward the people, right?
Right.
It gives an incentive to increase their
Right.
cash flow, yeah.
So if there's some mechanism we could work out, thinking
Sounds like
about how that may
accounting
work.
nightmare, but.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Well, in Green, they used to offer a discount if you paid early, and you actually have to raise the revenue to offset that.
Yeah, that's why I would only do it.
It makes it,
Yeah.
and town meeting format, that never went away, and they still do it, so
Oh, yeah, huh.
it's, those who are good payers are always going to pay early to get a break.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that was just a thought, but right now, before us, we have to set a interest rate for delinquent taxes.
I'll make a motion to set it at 7%.
I have a motion from Councilor Krass.
I'll second it.
I have a second from Councilor Pomelo. Any further discussion from council? Comments from the public? All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.
Okay. Now, the next item.
Order 2010-17, land appraisal contract.
I'd like to recommend that you skip that for the time being, and because we can come back to that, I'd like to have Pat do his assessing first.
Are they tied together?
They're
in a
tied
way?
together, yes, they are.
Council okay with that?
Yep.
To go through the assessing presentation and then come back to this land appraisal contract?
Good.
Okay, all right, so we'll go to other business.
Assessing presentation, yeah.
Okay,
Pat's going to give you a presentation about our way of getting our value back up to 100%. You have directed me over this past year to find a mechanism, because you've tried to put it before the people each time, and it cost about $320,000. The public just won't spend that kind of money for numerous reasons. We've come up with an idea and a plan that Pat thinks that we can get this done, and it sounds reasonable. So listen and ask questions and talk about it.
Thank you.
Want to get those lights? Just
Want to use that microphone?
Can focus on the wall.
That's
I think
good.
you can probably all hear me.
They probably can't at the audience out in the... There you go.
You can sit, Pat, if you want.
Okay, first of all, the town's assessment ratio is 56%. That has cost the town loss of revenue. The residents have lost homestead exemption value, veterans exemption value, and it's based on the fact that there hasn't been a reval since about 1988. There's been a lot of new construction without permits. There's been a huge change in the value of real estate in the state of Maine since 1995. What we have here is a requirement by the state to have our assessment ratio at 70% or more, up to a maximum of 110. To get to 70%, by going to 70%, we will not lose the tree growth reimbursement, for instance. The assessment ratio and the quality rating go hand in hand. Over the last few years, you can see how the assessment ratio has dropped. 67%, 63, 56. At the continuing rate, it's going to be hard to get anybody to get anything. These are revenue losses. If you look at the tree growth schedule, in '06, the town received $30,000. This year, we received $295,000. Now, this isn't a hard remedy. We can fix this year by getting our land only up to snuff. If we look at a full reval, as the term that I don't like, I like equalization. The reason being that what we're doing is making an attempt to improve the fairness and equity of the taxpayers' value. We go there from 56, we got to get up to 100 eventually. A town this size should run from $300,000 to $500,000 by one of the major companies coming in and doing it all at once in 1 year. They are basically big companies. They're in the business for a profit. They have large offices to support, staff to support. I think this $320,000 bid is probably as low as you would see from one of the major companies. I feel that an in-house equalization can be done significantly lower using some contract help and the town staff. Now, one of the processes is land valuation. One is to list and measure the various structures, and one is to deal with the commercial and personal property values. The assessment ratio is where we're trying, what we need to move to get our reimbursements back and to get more fairness and equity for the general public's homestead, blind, veterans exemptions. Assessment ratio is basically what you're assessed at versus what it sells for. And it's everybody says, well, is what it's sold for the fair market value? Well, we don't know. What the assessor's job is to somewhat investigate each sale to determine whether it's interfamily, foreclosure, or a number of other items that might cause it not to be the so-called arm's length sale. The other thing is that Cheryl is a good bargainer, and Charlie isn't. And they buy two houses exactly alike, and one is seriously higher or lower than the other. When we do a assessment ratio, we go through and make sure that the sales are, in fact, arm's length. Then we toss out the top 15 and bottom 15%, or 20% if that's what you'd wish, but most assessors use 15 on each end. That gets rid of the oddball sales. Gives you the center 70% of the market, and you make a statistical average. That gives you your assessment ratio. The problem with that is you cannot have half of your sales at 100% of market and the other half at 50 and call yourself 75. The state doesn't like that. It has to have a relatively close margin either side of the center or median price. And also, the two parts to value are the land and the structures. So you have to have your land values along that same general percentile as your structures, so that when you look at a sale, you come up with, say, $100,000 for a particular house, and it sits on a $30,000 lot. If that lot were to sell without the house, would it sell for $30,000? You try to keep it in that same range so that when a sale is just land, you can tell whether that's a fair market value also. And we sometimes wonder, how do you get land sales from general everyday land and building sales? Our computer program is excellent at figuring out the cost of a building. It doesn't know much about land. But if you take the cost of the building, subtract that from the land from the total price, you have a price for the land, a residual land value. We have to do that on condos anyway, because state law requires that we put a land value in their taxes. But condos don't own land. So we do a residual land value for condos, and we do the same in these quality ratings and ratios. Now, people ask, what is taxable property? There's a lot of urban myths out there. Taxable property consists of real property and business personal property. Real property is land, buildings, pieces and parts thereof of those buildings, or additions to the land. Personal property is not today your TV and your lawnmower. It is business equipment. That's what the legislature intends, even though the law doesn't read that way. The state recommends highly that we stick to personal property being business personal property. And basically, it's anything that the business needs or has in possession. And it can be parts of a building. For instance, a computer center may have what's called a halon floor, which is a static-free floor. It's not necessary for the building, it's only necessary for the business. So it's picked up as personal property. It may have a specialized air filtration system for that same computer room. Again, it's part of the building, but it's personal property. Your favorite pub has a bar. It's built in. And a walk-in cooler, it's built in. Those are business personal property. They're necessary for the business, not to support the building. Now, we got to get all this done over the next 2-year period. And the process that we would like to see, we purchased the TRIO assessing system last spring. And that provided us with the values for buildings. It's built in. So what we now need is to get land comparative to sales, brought to the prices that it should be for this day and time. Now, we have put out bids for asking for people to do a land valuation for this coming fiscal year, for this coming tax year, the commitment in August. We've had bids that range from roughly $8,000 to $120,000. The $120,000 man wants to do a Rolls-Royce job, which is admirable, but I think we can do just as well with the $8,000 bid, because what this gentleman is going to do is create value for various neighborhoods. And this is the new way of assessing land. It's not so much a square foot townwide, it's not so much a front foot townwide. Each neighborhood has a desirability factor. Each area. What is desirable in 2010 may not be desirable in 2020, or may not have been desirable in 1990. Land that is, I say, the residual values from a subdivision give you good numbers in a subdivision, but they don't give you anything for raw land, open land, farm space. That's all based on what is now determined as a percent of acre value. You have a base lot, let's say $50,000 in a given area, and if you have a half-acre lot, a 3-acre lot, or a quarter-acre lot, it may only be 50,000, 51,000, 42,000, something like that. It's all very close together. It's not $50,000 for an acre, 25 for a half acre. It doesn't, that's not the way it works anymore. We've got zoning, we've got regulations from the state, for instance, on septic systems. If you have a legal lot today, whether it's in a subdivision or in a village complex like we have both ends of town, you can have some extremely small lots that have the same value as the lot just up the street that's half, 3/4 of an acre. We've got some lots. I've been doing some data entry here for the last 3 months. We've got some lots in this town that are tiny. You subtract the value of the house from what the sale price of the lot is, and they're still selling for $30,000, $40,000. Yet, our current land values are further out of whack than our 56%. And that's why land is first. It's the worst. If we can get the land done this year, the appraiser will provide us with a list of prices for various areas, and I and my staff will apply it. That's where the savings comes in. We will then, if you agree, start the process of doing the buildings and the commercial work. The land value will be applied for the commitment date of 2/10. The buildings and commercial work will be applied to the 2/11 commitment. So by 2/11, we'll have everything up to snuff, and we will have a much fairer, more equitable tax situation than you have had in 20 years. Whoops, wrong button. The land value will in itself bring us up to about 70%. We can make other adjustments. We will guarantee to be at least at 70% for the commitment in 210. That gets us back our missing money from the tree growth, veterans, homestead, etc. The list and measure will be started this summer. It'll be done by probably October. Then it'll take myself and my staff time to go out and make sure this is correct data. And it will also take time to send out new valuation notices so that people know what those numbers are going to be. And it gives the people a chance to come in and say, Pat, why is it this and not that? We will meet with the owners, we'll discuss the new values, we'll make adjustments that are necessary, and August of 2011 will be between 95 and 100% of market value. Depending on the economy, I would probably aim at 95 versus 100, simply because if the market continues to sink, we won't be above the 110 mark in a year and have to make some foolish adjustment. The gentleman who made the $8,000 bid is considered one of the top men in the state. I think he's trying to keep working in a bad economy. I think he's hoping to get some further work down the road, and therefore we got a great offer. The next bid to his was $25,000. The list and measure, again, because the economy is down, I'm hoping to get every house list. A list and measure is literally an inspection of the property. You measure up the building, the shed, the deck, whatever, the garage, the barn. There's an inside inspection. Everything based on our new TRIO assessment program. The right questions asked, put into the machine so that we have the correct data, and we actually have a program that is very adjustable, and very fair. But we've got to have the right data to put in it. The program's only as good as the data we put in. As far as the commercial properties, we can expect some disagreements. That's why we have some money in there for select personal, commercial and personal property appraisals. You were told a few moments ago that we're still short a few people on the Board of Assessment Review. We do not want to be going to the county commissioners. We need our own local Board of Assessment Review, so we've got to get this filled and get them on board. The Board of Assessment Review is basically a jury. If I say the price is X and Mr. X says the price is Y, they listen to the presentations and they make a decision. That decision is appealable by the owner or by the town. If it's commercial and it's over $1 million, it goes directly to the state, and there's nothing we can do about it anyway. Which in a sense is good, because you get some really nice numbers when it comes back from there. Something like the Night Celotex mill. We can say it's worth $20 million, and they can say they only paid $6 million. But they only paid $6 million in a down economy, and we work on a long term. Basically, what it comes down to is, for about $80,000, we can get the town up to snuff. And that money will be paid back in 2 years on the reimbursement for tree growth that you've lost already. And this is over a long haul. For $80,000 spent over a 2-year period, for the next 10 years, we're going to be getting that tree growth reimbursement. We're going to be getting that homestead reimbursement. We're going to be getting the veterans reimbursement. Our mill rate right now is one of the highest in the state. The average mill rate is in the low teens. We'll bring it down. We'll be like everybody else. We know that the budget's going to be tough because times are tough and the state's not helping out the way they used to. But if everything stayed the same, with a mill rate back, a town value back up where it belongs at 95% or so, the mill rate in this town could be as low as mid-teens, someplace in that area, low to mid-teens. And as time changes, we know the economy is going to come back. It always does. And it can drop again. We will get probably closer to 40 to 45,000 on tree growth reimbursement if we do this land thing this year, based on the fact that for the first time since its inception, the state has raised the values on tree growth land. Softwoods only went up 25%. Mixed went up 72%, I believe, and hardwood went up 90%. If we were getting 30,000 before, we should certainly see a substantial increase in that. And folks, that'll pay for this. Do I have any questions?
Man, a couple of different things. One is, again, going back to the tree growth, which I know you mentioned quite a bit, and then we had a lot of discussion on it where it went from the 15 to 30, which was just, we figured was really a bad mess up from the state that year. Then we went back to the previous year of 15, which had nothing to do with our evaluations. That's basically state's dollars and how they equate it. And the idea that we went from 30 down to 200 isn't to do with our evaluations, that's state calculations, because I actually thought this year that Dale may even take away all tree growth. But again, I mean, just the idea, going from 15 to 30 down to 15 in a couple-year period, that really didn't have to do with our town evaluations. That had to do with more the state, with the way they were calculating it, correct?
No. The reason they calculated it that way was because we weren't up to 70%. in tree growth, for every 1% below 70 you are, they withhold 10% of your reimbursement. So 1 year, you were down 5% below 70, you lost 50% of your reimbursement. After that, you were below, the numbers.
It's just weird, I guess that we were trying to figure out that year also, because our valuation dropped, but we got twice as much. Then the next year, we didn't drop as much and we lost a lot more. So at that point, we thought that was because of the way they actually were doing the calculations to state what they're allowing for tree growth.
It was. What they did was they said, oh, look, they're down below 70%. How much? If you were, I think that first year you were down 5%. That's why it went from 30 to 15, because that's 55% below 70 is 50% of your reimbursement.
And how to go from the 15 to 30 the year before if it dropped, I guess was a question that we had that year. If it doubled 1 year and we actually dropped evaluations, but yet we doubled the amount that we got, which I guess was what we were trying to figure out that year, whether we were going to have to pay it back or not.
Probably because it got listed at 100% and it wasn't.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? Now, this year, we have to, whenever we have any sort of giveaway, whether it's homestead, veterans, blind, the tree growth, all those things have to be adjusted to your percent of market. So, this year's homestead was only 7280, when the 100 people at 100% were getting 13,000. Okay? Now, the reimbursement comes in the sense that, or in the fact that, when homestead first started, they didn't reimburse anything. They said, you give everybody $7,000 off and live with it. And some towns actually had to raise taxes to cover the loss of tree growth, of homestead. Then, a few years later, they jumped it to 13,000. The reimbursement is only on the 6. State law says that they forgot to put the language in so that they do have to reimburse us for that. But state law says when they create a problem that causes towns money, they have to reimburse up to, or at least 50% of the loss. So by jumping at 6,000, the 50% is 3. So for the 19,000 or 1,900 homestead exemptions that we have in town, multiplied by 3,000, gives you roughly your reimbursement if you were at 100%. Because we're at 56%, we're getting roughly 1,500 instead of 3,000 per homestead exemption.
So within that first year, if we go from just doing up properties and get up to 70%, your figuring of what we have for softwood, hardwood, and mixture would be over $40,000 reimbursement for tree growth the first year.
If we were at 30 3 years ago.
But we think that was a messed up number.
Well, I think that was the 100% value.
Yeah.
But if we were at 30, because I don't know what happened in the past.
Yeah.
I'm just.
It was a consistent 15, 17. I mean, it was consistent in the teens, and it jumped twice as much. So we were kind of concerned when we seen that year whether it was a
With
miscalculation.
as large a jump as they've given us for tree growth, it's got to be more.
Yeah.
So.
And the other part, I guess, what I have is, and again, tree growth, that's the question I had, because we were trying to calculate out those years, and it was very confusing trying to figure out how they could double it 1 year and whether we had to write a check back because we got too much, that type of thing.
The state gets confused, too.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're trying to figure out how that worked. The second part, could you really explain, which I think is the biggest concern that most people have, is if you're a taxpayer in Lisbon Falls that's been here for 30 years, and you've had a house here paying taxes along the line, and you haven't done any changes to your house. I mean, you haven't done an addition that wasn't permitted, you haven't upgraded, granite all through your house, and your house, say right now, you're paying taxes on a $60,000 house.
Okay.
And whether it's worth 100 or not, it doesn't make a difference, you're paying taxes on a $60,000 house. And right now, you say we're at 50 some odd % valuation. So when you get to 100% valuation on that house, the way the mill rate works, if the person hasn't done anything, at the end of the day, the person really shouldn't be paying any more for taxes in a sense, because if the percentages of what their tax base was the house hasn't changed, it's just basically the percentage of how things have increased, the mill rate should go down just as much.
Yes, it
The
should.
person that's going to be, the person that's going to be affected the most is someone that actually has a house that's done a lot of changes to that has not been equated in their tax rate.
That's correct.
So, I mean, I think that's the biggest concern, but most people in town have been here for a long period of time, is when they say, well, your house is only at 52 or 56, and we're going to bring it to 100, and every time we have a meeting, we talk about not raising taxes on people because they can't afford it, which is still a concern that we, as we've seen with Lewiston and Auburn over the last years, where, you know, they do evaluation, it comes in great, the next thing you know, there's people getting their heads chopped off because of the increase in rates over one period of time. But I guess if you could explain the difference on how that mill rate versus the idea of the evaluation.
First of all, everybody should pay the same percent of value for their taxes. The people who are not making out well right now are generally people with low income. The elderly on fixed income Social Security, young people, young couples just starting out with, they haven't developed their job skills enough to be high paid. People in low-end jobs. Those are the people who are paying more often, those people are the ones that are paying a higher percent in their taxes than they should. They're being assessed at higher value than their property is compared to people with good incomes who are putting on additions, doing upkeep, and not getting charged for it. We've had a number of sales in this town, even in this down economy. We have good data to work from. We should not have any problem making this a fair, equitable solution. And the people who are going to make out the best are the people who have the least advocacy, to be honest. Right now, we've had, just for example, a sale of a mobile home park. Now, for commercial property, there are three ways of determining value. There is replacement cost, in other words, what it costs to build and depreciate for age. There is sales analysis, doing like sales, and there is something called the income approach. And if we did an income approach on mobile home parks, the value would be way beyond what it would probably be fair market value right now. So that's a tough one to use. But we just had a sale here in town of a large park. Right now it's being assessed for approximately I think it's $6,200 per site, and the sale price was over $20,000 per site. Now, those types of businesses like that will come up in their value, depending on how much the increase in value is over or compared to the change in the mill rate will determine whether they pay more taxes or less. The average, well, statistically, in a town that does a equalization, you have a third of the town goes up, a third of the town stays the same, and a third goes down. However, that's generally, almost every town in Maine has waterfront, not other than rivers. The rivers here in this town don't seem to affect the property value a lot. In that other scenario, you have most of your one-third going up on the waterfront, because waterfront appreciates so much faster than any other kind of land. In this situation, I would expect that it would be more like 40% stay the same, 40% go down, and only 20% go up, because we don't have that waterfront effect, and there aren't that many totally out of whack properties. What we have is we need an adjustment. Land is the worst, as I said before. Land is the worst. The buildings have been adjusted over time. Unfortunately, people with new buildings are paying a higher percentage of the value in taxes than people with older buildings. That's not right either. Just because a house is new, they shouldn't be at 85% while the rest of the town is at 50. Just because a house is old, shouldn't be at 50% when the rest of the town is at 70. We have to make a fair and equitable process. The public has to know that they are getting a fair deal. And my job isn't to protect the town's value, as much as I know councils would like that. But if I look at a piece of property and we assess it and it comes out lower than what it has been, that's what it is. The assessor has no axe to grind other than to do a good job. And we can do that. Make it fair. We can make it clean. And we can get our reimbursements up there. The other thing is, if you want to fight the state and your numbers are bad on your state municipal valuation, you have no leg to stand on. You give me a chance to put this town business back in order where it belongs, and we'll be able to stand up to the state and say, look, these numbers are good. And they're going to say, yes, they are. And therefore, you won't lose your revenue sharing or your school funding and so on. Or not as badly. God only knows what Augusta's gonna do.
I wish you could guarantee that, but.
Any other questions from council?
I have a question on the part-time staff you talked about hiring. Were those going to be people who are trained in assessing, or, what kind of people would those be?
Best scenario, they'd be people, assessors like I was a few years ago that are semi-retired, that come in and do the job. Worst case scenario, give me 4 kids from the Muskie Institute and 4 days to train them, and they'll do a good job. And they may get some credit hours for it, and we can get a good job done at a low price.
Another question? I do have another question. Okay. If we go forward with even with the land part of the evaluation, I guess my concern would be is whether it goes really high or really low, whether or not once the evaluation is done, does council actually look at it and actually respond to that before it actually goes to be part of the tax base for the year? And, I mean, that would be one of my biggest concerns, would be at the time of trying to generate business in Lisbon, especially looking at commercial and land, and not saying that we don't want it to be fair, but we would hate to actually promote something that would be, God, it's too much controversy also. I mean, it's just one of those things. It would be nice to see what the numbers are after we do the evaluations before we actually implement it or not, or if we can do it implemented in a stage, or if it has to be all at once. I mean, just after watching what Lauriston did and having to go through all that and throw it out the window and start all over again, because of just I shouldn't say throw it all out the window, but there was major concerns after that, and I don't think the process worked quite the way they thought initially it was going to. It would just be nice to see where the town would actually rest when the evaluation process is done before we implemented it. And that would be a concern that I would have.
As far as your commercial,
Yeah.
and trying to establish business here,
Yeah.
you have the various TIF applications, and you have other incentives tax-wise. Personal property, there's a thing called Better and Betty that are reimbursement programs and exemption programs for businesses. I've had out-of-state companies say, is your state foolish? You're the only state that does this, but we are doing it. And it's a way to sell business.
And TIFs, I do understand are great for new businesses moving forward, but, one of the concerns I have with businesses that have already been established, actually having concerns in that same process, like people that do like self-storage and have lots of units. If for some reason overnight the taxes were to go up by a quarter, we'd probably have very upset people. But again, it's just one of those things, I didn't know if once we were doing this evaluation, if we actually, if once we say, yes, we're going to implement the idea of going for us to do the evaluations, if that automatically, that when they're done, that actually goes through as being a tax rating.
I work for you.
And that would be my concern.
You tell me not to implement, it's not going to get implemented.
It would be nice to know what the end result would be before we actually said.
You'll be able to
Yeah.
see that through the process, and you will be able, we will be able to say, we're not going to implement it.
Okay,
Right.
that's
But,
my concern.
I mean, I think one of the things we have to be careful about in comparing Lewiston and
Yes.
Auburn and some of those things is, right, the other piece of this whole process is that, right, Auburn, when they did theirs, their expenses were skyrocketing. They were doing all this building and everything, right? So your ability to lower your mill rate, but then you have all this additional expense with no real great revenue increases, right, that cause you to increase that
Get
mill
along,
rate,
yeah.
right? So, and I think that also happened in Lewiston, right? I mean, I've said this a number of times, if we're going to do something like this, we have to be very aware of when's debt dropping off, when can we keep things as low as we can, right, and not increase our expenses, so that when you do this increase in your assessing ratio, that your mill rate goes down and it stays down. And you could help everybody out in that perspective, right, in keeping them down. I mean, the other thing I think we have to do, or we should do, is if some of these are shocks to people, I mean, I've had this discussion with Steve, we need to communicate with them, we need to work with them, just like we do with our property taxes and stuff like that, right? You know, your taxes aren't going to triple all of a sudden, right? We'll phase into that, right? We have the ability to do all of those things.
That's what I was talking about, the idea
So
of
you
how
have
it is.
the ability to make those changes and phase some of this stuff in over time, so that you still gradually
And I think
get
that's
to
what
where
my
you want to
question
do and
was,
don't
yeah.
throw the work away.
Also, remember that.
Dale, just a second.
Well, bottom line is, if you're going to do this, and it's fair and equitable,
Right.
okay? The public realizes that we're not reevaluating the town to create more revenue, but we're reevaluating the town to get our revenue from the state that we deserve, but that we want to make it fair and equitable. That's what you got to convince the town. If they think you're doing this to crazy revenue, then
Right.
I won't be visiting you while everybody else is, Steve.
I think you will find that in Auburn, they also put through in a couple of pet projects that drove the taxes up.
Right.
Absolutely.
Which
Exactly.
I believe, which I truly believe, I mean, the hardest thing is most of the taxpayers in Lisbon, that's what they've seen from Lewiston Auburn, what was on TV.
Exactly.
Okay, they didn't hear Mike actually give his presentation how this works, and that's why, to me, it was really important you to try to establish someone if they have a house and they've been here for a long period of time, and the house is still the same house it was evaluated years ago when it was at 100%, when we go back to 100% again, the mill rate should change to the point where the tax should stay pretty equal.
Yeah.
Which is important for people to know, that we're not spending money to actually increase money. So, I mean, that's, to me, it's an important note.
Only people whose taxes will go up are those people who have done work that we don't know about, and increased value, or where something outside their control drives a value up, such as becoming very desirable. I think you probably remember the old port 45 years ago in Portland. You couldn't give a piece of property away. And now you can't touch it with a golden rule. Those things change value. I have no control, and nobody does over that. So,
Market-driven.
Yeah, wouldn't that also, I mean, the idea of having someone come into town and actually look at the areas that are more desirable and not desirable, and that's all based on selling value of houses. So, I mean, it isn't someone goes in, it's basically on the history of the past, whether 4 houses sold in that area and the market value is 180 versus 250,000. Pretty much the price is actually direct you in the direction of what's desirable and what's not.
all
Yeah.
statistics.
Plus, the benefit, like we've said before, at this particular time, because the economy is so bad, the bubble of those high price on homes is gone. And I really do believe, and Pat and I've had this discussion, that some of these values may already be at 100%.
They're very close, some of them.
Very close, because
But they
the bubble's
shouldn't be
gone, and it's
taxed
more
that way,
realistic.
because the rest of the town's only at 56%.
So-
That's why, and 56% isn't a good number, because some people are at 30 and some are at 70.
Right.
Okay.
And
Okay,
this equity is the key to the whole thing.
thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we need to go back to orders and
Order
resolutions.
2010-17, land appraisal contract.
Like Pat had said, we had put out, just to kind of get an idea of what it was going to cost to do just the land value. We actually had 3 people who were going to submit. One of them had some health issues and chose not to. Bill Van Tynen was one, and I've worked with Bill Van Tynen. He does the big commercial properties, hydro plants, paper mills. He's got staff that he works with, and he's very good at what he does. So,
Can you do non-commercial property?
yes, he can. He can
Okay.
do just about anything. And I'm sure he's looking for work. That's why he gave the price he did. Or the range, I should say.
So, are you looking for council to approve this contract tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
If we could.
And what's the value of this contract?
It's at the $8,000. From what his presentation was $8,000 for,
You walked out?
yeah, yeah.
Oh. Out the door, gone? Oop. On the clock. Not to exceed the 7880, I think is the way I would put it. He said he could do it between 3,000 and 7,800. I don't know how he can do it that inexpensive. I know the quality of his work. The quality of the work is there. But I would, if you're going to vote on this, it's not to exceed the 7,800.
So he starts working on it, and he gets 30% of it done, and he's at his 7,800, so we're,
No, he'll have to sign a contract
Okay.
that states that he will complete
Okay.
all the land valuation. We're going to do the data entry.
Roger?
When we're looking at a land evaluation or an evaluation of the town, and we're looking to spend $300,000 to $500,000 to do it, and somebody comes in and says they're gonna do it for $8,000,
red
it
flag.
looks at me like it says, "Run, buddy, run!"
Yeah.
You know, this stings. I don't like it.
But I don't think that, I don't think that what that $8,000 is giving us only a very small portion of what that 320 would have been. I mean, the 320 would have been someone coming in and we sit back and we just pretty much take the information when they're all completed. I mean, I think the fair figure that you're looking at is thinking that you're gonna sublet it for $320,000 or you're gonna do it in-house for $80,000. I mean, that's pretty much the number difference, is not so much the $8,000 versus the $320,000. But again, I think it's fairly reasonable, it's beyond reasonable, the idea that you can get the town done for $8,000. I mean, I spent $3,000 last year appraising a 2.5 acre spot, so.
Well, and I think the other thing too is, I think this is a different approach than what we've always talked about in the past. I mean, if I heard what Pat said correctly, this is to give you an idea of what property's worth in village areas, what property's worth in subdivisions, what property's worth for rural farmland area, right, and stuff like that. It's not to go look at everybody's land, so to speak, and determine each land's value based on the billion, which is what the $300,000 to $500,000 approach is, where there's these companies come in and they go look at everybody's individual house, everybody's property, they go look at the deed records and all this other stuff, and they go through all this analysis work and come up with, here's the price of your building and here's the price of your land. This is to get us into a grouping mechanism that is fair and equitable based on the symmetry of our town.
Boundaries
That's
of
the way I
lands don't
understood
change.
it.
Boundaries of lands don't change.
The
like
land
houses.
valuation, let me just explain what he does.
Yeah, but.
For this land valuation
do it at all.
process, he doesn't go out and visit every piece of property. He sits down and goes most of it's computer work. He does evaluations on what's been selling in these types of areas. So he's sitting in an office. He's not going back and forth looking at we have the property sizes already. We know what we have for a half acre in this area, what we have for a half acre in another area. All he's going to do is assign a value to a specific region for a specific size lot, and then we do all the data entry. And before we do that, Pat will review with him all his data. But it's like a person sitting in a computer most of the time and researching, and that's what he's doing. He's researching what the sale of property has been for just land.
Dale?
So what do we do? So we hire him, and how does he get paid? Does he get paid as he's completing the work? Say we get into it a quarter of the way and we're not happy with his work, do we get out of the rest of the contract? Is it a full payment up front?
I'll have to have a
You know what I'm saying?
contract
I mean,
drafted.
just if we kept ourselves, with Roger's concern, if we keep ourselves in the position where we can say, we're not happy, right?
Yep.
At that point of the process, he goes down the street and we don't pay the rest of the work. You know, if we had a contract like that, then, you know.
Yeah, we'll have to put
We can
together,
control the situation a little bit better.
we'll have to, like we do any project like
Yep.
this, when it's a contract deal,
Yep.
we put together the contract, our attorney looks it over, and everybody agrees upon the terms. And if the terms don't work, then we don't do the contract, simple as that.
So is that something we should go put together and then bring that to council to vote on
That's what I think.
at a rate?
See how the contract reads.
Mark?
Yeah, are there other towns that have done this way of splitting up the land versus the buildings, or is this a first?
I couldn't tell you. This is on Pat's recommendation. Pat's been in this business for a long time. He was doing this kind of work prior to coming here, just part-time in retirement. And I think it was Millbridge was a town he just finished up, but he did the whole package. You're talking 4,000 parcels here in the town of Lisbon. Millbridge is a very small community. I think it may have like 900 parcels or something. So it's not the same, and I'd have to ask Pat if it's done this way. I have confidence that he knows what he's doing.
I mean, it seems reasonable because you have both pieces that make up your total
I mean,
valuation.
if somebody goes to court to, dispute this, and they have, there's one evaluation on their building, another on the land, it's kind of.
Well, it's always done that way.
But that's how your tax
Right,
bills
but
are.
normally it's
Tax
done by,
bills.
they come out and look at the whole parcel at once and make one observation, not, one from 1988 and one, estimated from today or something.
Well, that's why he said there's going to be a process if the person is not satisfied with their
They can appeal
evaluation.
that, right.
That they can appeal it, and it can go before the board, and he can present his evidence that this is not fair and equitable, and then it can be adjusted. So long as we have a process in the place that's going to make that landowner, happy in the end, or, you know what I'm saying?
don't like it. The one thing that bothers me is that we have properties that have sold new homes in this town, especially with the Lisbon end of the town. We have quite a group of new homes. And these parcels of land were valued at the going prices of today. And now, you're going to be using that information, sitting at a computer and looking at the whole town. And I just don't see that you're going to do it by,
It's all information, though, Roger.
yeah, but it's all information, but you're not going to do it sitting at a computer. I think that somebody's going to get out there and somebody's going to look at this stuff, and you're not going to do it for $8,000. Not and do it
I have
right.
a couple of comments. We had a workshop here last week, and we talked about the comprehensive plan. And we talked about parts of the comprehensive plan being looked at and changed, and I know we've talked about that in revitalization quite a bit, because there are some areas of town that are kind of not quite sure if that's what they meant, or that's what it should be. So couldn't that come into play, changing some zoning areas and what things are considered as? Isn't that possible? And the other thing is, what are these desirable properties he's talking about? Do we have a large amount of those properties that are desirable, or do we just have a small amount? I'd be curious to know that. I just think those are factors that might affect it, and it's something that we do need to look at.
May I make one, I think it'd be interesting, I mean, for the money that would be spent compared to the 320, that's why I mentioned the idea, it'd be nice to look at what the end project looks like and sit back and look at the numbers and see how this looks, because it may just make perfectly good sense on paper once it's all done. I guess my concern initially when I was thinking about it is you actually have a piece of farmland that is valued very little for frontage because there's a lot of acreage, and then within a year or two, you actually have half a dozen $250,000 homes put on it. So of course, the valuation of that piece of property goes up quite a bit. It's desirable at that point because it's beautiful homes. So the property right next door is the same amount of acreage. Now, is that acreage desirable too because, you know, it is in that same zone? So I'd be curious to see how that actually is broken up. I mean, for the money being spent to actually get an overview of the town, the $8,000 is, to me, is still a very reasonable amount of money to at least start the process to see what direction we're going in. Because we may be able to do that process and feel that there's enough information that we may need to expand it a little bit more, or to actually break it up a little bit more. I don't know, but I think we need to move in some direction, so I don't think that we ought to just say it's not a good idea. I think it's kind of a neat idea. I mean, there's no question about it. I mean, land doesn't change size. You can't add on to land. It's the boundaries are there, so the idea of coming up with some type of value would, you know, and compare it, and if nothing else, what we could do is take our properties, what we do get result in, and compare it to towns around us, and see if it actually makes sense or if it doesn't. You know what I mean? But you only can do that if you have the data to compare, because right now we don't have any data to compare, so.
And you're not gonna collect that kind of data for $8,000.
You could, actually, it's nothing more than, I mean, if you're going to sell your house today, within 15 minutes, you can go online and get what the average selling price in your area is and in your town. So, I mean, I think the data is there to actually come up with some evaluation that way. It's amazing. I couldn't believe when I was going to sell my house, how quickly you can get raw data as far as for what's selling in the neighborhood and what the land prices were. And there's a lot of information out there on computer if you actually have the resource to do it. So if you actually have all the town map and actually have those resources, I think you can, over a period of time, put together an accurate map. Whether it's a map that we like or not, I don't know, but.
I think we need to see the contract, and we certainly can't vote on something we don't know what the terms are.
I agree.
So,
Yeah.
I'd like to see the breakdown of how he does,
Well,
how he does it, more or less.
I could schedule him to come to one of the meetings,
well, that's what we should do then.
Yeah.
and we'll get the contract drafted up and have him come do a presentation. What he's
Yeah,
going
I
to
think you ought to do a presentation, and we ought to see what the terms are.
You know, Vern brought up a very good point, though, is if you take a complex of new homes that are $160,000 home, $170,000 home, and they're sitting on half, three-quarter acre lots, that half, 3 acre lot in that setting is worth more than that half, 3 acre lot out on the side of the town with an old home that's falling down, and there's several of them that aren't that, you know. These are things that you can't go in a computer and find this information out.
I mean, that's kind of what Pat just explained to us, is that, you know, he said, we got some real small pieces of property in town that buildings are on, but when you look at how they sell, their property is worth the same as, a half acre lot or whatever, right? I mean, that was just part of what he just told us, so, I mean,
It'd be nice to see a map and show how the different prices are around town. It'd be kind of curious to see how that lays out,
How many neighborhoods are going to be when they
Exactly.
redivide it, would be nice to
Well,
see.
you can just take a look at what's going on just off Upland Road in that area. There's been some nice homes built there. It's become a very desirable place to be. Once you get water run out there, it's going to even be more desirable. So it's different compared to something that's way out on Route 9 or something.
Right, well, that's why we're gonna have the software, we're gonna have the system in place. So this is an ongoing process.
Right.
Just like he talked about,
Right.
the Portland area was worth nothing and now it was. So you get this guy's got this beautiful piece of farmland that's got a low value because it's farmland, and all of a sudden he develops it. That's when you got the data entry and the system in place to adjust to that. This is an ongoing process,
Right.
year after year.
Oh,
I mean, you
absolutely.
could have one area that, could go down in value, and another end of town all of a sudden going up in value, and you've got to constantly be adjusting that. But if you don't have the system in place and the data entry in place and the help in place, you never can adjust it. That's the problem we're in, we're in the problem we're in now.
right.
But we're going to put a system in place, and that's going to be ongoing adjustments. They'll always adjust, Roger.
And I agree with you, Dale, that you do have to adjust as you go, but the thing of it is that at this particular time, we're gonna have to collect an awful lot of data, and an $8,000 figure to collect this data and be accurate, I think is,
Oh.
Santa
So-
Claus left last month.
But it ain't 8,000, it's 82,000.
For the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's only one
Right.
portion of
But
that information, Roger, it's
The
82,000.
320 to the 82 is a
Right.
considerable drop.
So we will schedule this individual to come in, have a contract structured, and have him come in and talk to us about what he does and how he does it, and
Yeah.
a little further
I
information.
think it would be,
Okay.
a comment, I
Yep.
think it would be good when he does the presentation to maybe take a sample of some of the different districts and what his evaluation's going to look like, to take some of that fear factor out of it. I mean, and then based on that, we can make a determination if that's something that we want to go forward
Good
with.
idea.
Because people are going to be really concerned about what that's going to look like.
Yep.
And
Okay.
maybe taking the properties like you're talking about, Roger, and trying to make a comparison with the information that he uses and how he's going to come up with that determination so that we can really be well-versed at whether or not we want to do that.
And what's he got for references? Give us some references
Another good point.
of other towns he's done this with.
I mean, I think the thing you have to be careful of is neighborhoods where you haven't had a lot of sales, it may be hard to get a good value for it. If you had one house sell, then, do you know if that's the average or the outlier,
Right.
Well, they'll do the outlying area. It won't just be in Lisbon.
Right.
It'll be Topsom, Bowden, Bodenham,
Within
I mean,
within this region.
25-mile radius, usually, or 20 miles.
They know what they're doing.
Okay,
I will do that.
Oh,
all right.
You get the public, I don't know if you
Oh,
want.
yes.
Oh, comments? Please.
It would have been great to have had an opportunity for public comment while Pat was still here, because I can honestly tell you that when he was giving his
Can you
presentation.
get just a little closer, Michelle? I can't hear you.
Actually can't hear my mouth. Okay. It would have been great to have had that opportunity, because you didn't really look up to see if a lot of us had questions, or at least a few of us, while Pat was still here, because I would have loved to have had the opportunity to ask him something, and I realized he was on the clock still. But while he was giving his presentation, I can tell you the very first thing I wrote down that came to breast in my concerns was that $8,000, and I'll tell you why. I understand that we went from, $350 to $82 by doing it in-house. However, of the bids that he asked for doing the land appraisal portion only, $7,800 was the lowest. The next closest competitive bid, he said, was over $20,000. That's a huge gap. I'm not talking about the difference of doing it in total at a house versus in-house. That's a huge gap just for that one portion. And I guess where I'm raising an issue is one, are we talking a firm, or are we talking a person who does it independently? If it's someone independently, what's their relationship to anybody here, let alone, do we have references? Do we know what his work has been? Have we talked to other towns that he's done assessing for to know what the product is at the end result that you're getting, so that we know that $8,000 isn't buying us, essentially land in Florida that I'd like to sell you as prime real estate that we know is swampland. I want to know that whether it's $8,000 or $20,000, I understand the reasoning for doing it. And I'm one of those, I pulled my permits, but I've spent 3 years renovating my home, so I know I'm going to get hit on the reassessment based on the value from the last one, and my taxes are going to go up. I understand that. I don't have an issue with that. What I have an issue with is you get what you pay for. And when he said 8,000, or the 7,800, the very next thing he said was 20K plus was the next closest competitive rate. That set out in my mind a red flag right away. And I'm sorry, if you don't know numbers, how could that not set out right away as something like, wait a minute, how can one guy say 7,800, somebody else who's competitive in the market, competitive in the business, the economy the way it is now, everybody's looking for work, how can that not seem very, very low and undercut when the next competitive bid was over $20,000? How can they do it for such a less amount? And I get that it's mainly computer work, but the quality, the quantity, and what you get is what you spend. And I just want to know, how much research are we doing into the person that we're looking to potentially hire? Why not have the lowest 3 people that put out bids come in and do presentations on their work, provide references that you can go back to, and then pick even if it's the middle of the road, you've done your homework, you've got something better to present to us for what we're paying for. I guess that's just kind of, I mean, immediately before Roger ever brought it up, it was the very first thing that stuck out in my mind.
I don't know where the price of 78,000 came, but we only have.
7,800.
7,800?
Yes.
Yeah. The two bids we have here is maximum 7,800, the other one is 25,000.
Yeah, huge
And
gap.
and we had one person that was going to bid, and he chose not to, but he was going to bid 35,000. So it's, there isn't that much of a difference, but I think Bill Van Tynen, as well as Mr. Caldwell, have been in this business. They've done a lot of municipal work. Pat and I both know these individuals. We can certainly get you references if you need them, and I definitely will provide them. But Bill Van Tynen's been around for a long time and does quality work. I'm sure of that.
Right, but, I mean, you just said that the 35 would have been the next one if they would have submitted. I understand 25 to 35 isn't that big a gap, but 78 to 25, that's a huge gap. I mean, you're talking 4 times, basically, the price. Well, not quite, 3 times the price for what's supposed to be the same amount of work and the same quality of work and the same end result. I don't understand why there's such a huge gap, and I'm not questioning somebody's ability to do the job, but those numbers have got to stick out for somebody to say, why is there such a grave difference in price? If 7,800 is one and the next available one that came in was at 25, that's a big difference. That's a huge gap.
I think we do want to make sure that Mr. Van Tynen is on the same page as what we're expecting and make sure there's no miscommunication
Right.
there.
I mean, we have asked,
We asked for proposals. This is what we have.
well, I mean, council has now asked that we pull together a contract to bring the individuals in to discuss and review that with them. So I think we're trying to address all the concerns you're bringing up.
Is there a way, though, for the 2 that did submit them? I mean, can they?
We can bring in as many people as council wants. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, typically, we usually look at the lowest bidder and validate what that person's going to do and the qualifications they have, and if that meets council's, decisions, then we can go forward. If we want to bring in another one, we can bring in another one.
Was the lowest bidder the person that last did our roof?
What's that?
Was the lowest bidder the last person that did our roof? It's just an example. I'm just saying, you get what you pay for, and here we are putting more money into the roof
I
again.
don't know if that was the lowest bidder who did this building.
Well, you said we tend to go. I'm just saying, what you had said was that you
Well,
tend
we
to go
do
with
tend to
the
go with
lowest.
the lowest bidder.
Sometimes the lowest isn't always the
That's probably why
best.
we're looking for the contract to find a way to exit out of it if the quality's not there.
Right, but I'm talking about if we went with the lowest bid the last time, I mean, look at the age of the building and look at where we are now. That's all I'm saying, is we need
I agree with you.
more
Just to
information.
clarify on the building was put out to a general contractor, and he hired all the subcontractors. This council, or Board of Selectmen at the time, did not hire the subcontractors. It was a general contractor who did that and submitted a price that was adopted or accepted, so.
Right. No, I'm not insinuating the town council had anything to do. I'm just saying sometimes the lowest bid is exactly what I said, you get what you pay for. So that's just my concern is, I don't want to see us spend more money down the road to get what we want as an end result now.
Okay.
Yeah. We're doing living it with the town garage. We're on our second contractor to fix the beam over the door.
Right, and
You know,
as good
These are the kind of
steward.
issues that the
Well,
people of town are looking at.
and I understand that, but at the same time, we put things in place where we could opt out, and we could validate, and we could monitor that quality, which is what we should be doing as good stewards. And so we put ourselves in position to do that.
Take the lowest bid, so you can't win.
Right. Thought.
Dorothy Fitzgerald, a resident of Lisbon Falls, longtime resident. I've been chomping at the bit even before Roger and Laurie spoke up. I agree with both of them. This gentleman is going to, or whoever's doing this land revaluation, going to be sitting in front of a computer, where, here in town, in East Overshoe or something, in order to do be fair and do a fair and equitable revaluation, you can't sit behind a desk. That person or persons, that firm would have to come into town, drive around the town, get a feel of the community, get a feel of the various neighborhoods in a community, get a feel even of the difference in Lisbon and Lisbon Falls. You can't sit behind a desk and know a community. Your thoughts?
I personally don't think, I hope we didn't insinuate that the person is only going to sit behind a computer. I think we said most of the work was going to be done through a computer work. I would envision that this individual will look through the town, see our different things. He's got to do comparisons to other communities. So I don't think they're going to do this in a vacuum. But we were going to find out when we bring the individual in to review his contract with them and understand all that. I think we're hearing what you guys are asking for, and we're trying to get to that point, and we're going to schedule another meeting to have someone come in and discuss his approach, how he does it, and we're going to have a contract that we'll decide whether or not we want to go forward with.
Well, listening to your comments and the town manager's comments, and my understanding was that this person is going to come in and this is all computer work, not
I'm
visual.
sorry you took it that way. It was not intended. All of us as counselors discussed this, and we have come to a council agreement of how we're going to move forward, which is to bring the individual in, listen to them, tell us how they're going to potentially do some comparisons, and have a contract in place.
And find out just what their method is.
Right,
Right,
Thank you.
exactly.
every 10 times.
Anything else? Okay, next item, please.
It's under audience participation.
No,
Which
town
one?
manager report.
Town manager's, okay, yep, town manager's report. That's the new one you passed
Town
out
manager's
tonight,
report.
yeah.
Public Works Garage, they completed that. They're tearing down their scaffolding today. The I-beam has been replaced and all painted and bricked up. They did a nice job. The school, or the Community Track Committee, we met last Monday, and everybody's kind of laid out what they want this whole recreational sports facility to look like. We've all agreed that we'd like to have some CAD students who are in the technology school do this work for us and see if we can get some volunteers. And also, once that is done, the committee will ask some art students, we have some very talented art people from what I've seen, do some renditions so people get to visualize. I think, like we've said before, visualization is a great thing. And then we can start looking at, I've already done a preliminary budget just for the track, but it'll be a whole comprehensive plan of what the school and the town would like to see. So that's, looking forward to that. It's been a fun committee to work with. They get pretty excited. February 2nd meeting, I had planned to schedule early to have Twyla give a walkthrough, but since we have a public hearing, we'll kind of reschedule that one. January 26th, Ryan, because of his foot, wasn't able to come to this meeting and wouldn't have made it very good on time anyway. So if we could meet next Tuesday at 6 o'clock, you'll get to see the economic development presentation from Rosie as part of that ongoing orientation. And directly after that, I've given her half an hour to give her presentation and hopefully take questions. And she's not going to get into too much detail, but just overview of what's been going on and what she does. And then we'll go right into the lighting evaluation of what we had thought of doing tonight.
So it's 6 o'clock?
6 o'clock, yeah, on the 26th, here.
So that's a workshop with
That's a
Rosie?
workshop with Rosie.
For economic development overview and
Yeah,
review,
and
and
also-
then we'll have an additional workshop on the lighting.
On the lighting, that's correct. The finance director position, we had 29 applicants. We interviewed 4 last Thursday. We narrowed it down to 2 people out of the 4 that we talked to. I've offered it to 1, but that has to come with the council's blessing, and it's something that we need to have some conversation about, and we're not going to be able to get to it tonight. So I'm hoping that prior to Rosalie or after the lighting thing, we can talk, and I'll schedule a regular executive session so we can talk about that position and the people that we've talked to. Is that okay with everybody?
Why was only 4 interviewed out of 29?
Why? Because some of them we couldn't afford, that we went through, there's a whole checklist of things we looked at: education, salary requirements, experience, and through process of elimination, we narrowed down to what I thought was the best 4 that we could afford, and had the experience and education that we were looking for.
It's a typical process.
That's the process.
This question I had.
Yep.
Okay, so along on the 26th with the economic development and the lighting, we'll have an executive session for discussing the finance director.
Yep. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, that's all I have. Any questions on that? Okay, move on to the finance report. Not really anything that stands out here. Our revenue from our excise tax is not quite where it should be, but we expected that with the economy. Hopefully, we'll meet our budget, but I'm not sure we will. Revenue sharing, again, is down. It's only at 40%. It should be higher than that. The state changed the revenue sharing numbers on us, which they seem to do on a regular basis lately on everything. We had anticipated $1 million in revenue sharing. They have said we'll probably do about $860,000, so we're a bit off there. But again, that's a crapshoot. If the economy picks up before the end of the year, we might make it. Otherwise, there's nothing outstanding on the revenue side. And any questions on the revenue?
I do have one quick
Yes, Lori?
question. In my professional world, we've been advised that the state will be out of money by April 15th, which means that we go from April 15th to June 30th with no revenue from state. Is that the same on the town's end, and do we have?
We have not heard that, but I'd ask my
Would that be a
representative
fair
here.
assumption?
You heard that from that meeting
I did, yes.
probably from the senator?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that one senator making that comment?
Well, it's probably, was it Rotundo, that she's on appropriations, so she probably has a pretty good clue on that. More than I would, because I'm not on appropriations,
Yeah.
but, yeah.
We haven't heard that, but I anticipate that we're not done hearing about cuts in revenue from the school or from the town side. It's just we don't have anything in writing.
Just something to keep in mind.
Yep, it is definitely something we have to.
Unfortunately, it's not a good thing to keep in mind.
It sure isn't.
Floating a few loans.
On the expense line, everything is within where it should be. There are some, if you look, that may appear to be higher, but if you get into the detail, like on technology, he's at a higher percentage. If I can find him here, I think he's at 82, 83% on the engineering end. And some of that is because of software costs. We've already paid out our software expenses for licenses. Same thing with, when you look at Mark's revenue side is already, on recreation, is already met pretty close to what he anticipated. That's because a lot of his money comes in after July when the programs, the biggest amount of programs are. So, but I think we're within where we need to be. Department heads are doing a good job and keeping their budgets on track. And see how the winter goes with the snowfall. Any questions?
Questions on expenditures? Okay,
Okay, that's all I have.
all right. Next item, please.
Audience participation. Those in the audience who wish to address the council may come forward. Please use the microphone at the podium.
My name is Mark Sherback. I live at 42 Davis Street, Lisbon Falls. I have a couple of items, concerns, unrelated to anything we said here this evening. They're more personal in nature. I was speaking to Councilman Dale last week with my concerns, and he suggested I come here this evening and address them to you. I'll be brief. The first one is the next section of trail that's going to be built. There's a portion of it that is going, will be abutting my property. And my property is situated so that if you were on the football field down to South End, my house is about 100 feet behind that goalpost. There's a little strip of greenery that separates my home from the playing field. And that little strip of greenery is owned by the town of Lisbon. And the trail is going to be going through that strip. And I guess what I'm doing here tonight is seeing if I could get a little consideration, I guess it would be, to have that trail be closer to the playing field than it would be to my property. And one of the great reason being is my home is very close to that line on my property. My kitchen window, one of my main entry doors, is probably 20 feet from my line. And so if the trail came right up to, I have a fence, if the trail came right up to my fence, that trail would literally be 18, 20 feet out my kitchen window, out my front door. And there is room there to just give a little bit of buffer. So that's it wouldn't cost anything but a little consideration. So that's what I'm doing here tonight. And since speaking with Dale, the Trail Commission has sent me an invitation to attend their meeting and for any ideas or concerns that I have. So I will be attending and addressing them also. The second one is I have a drilled well down on my property, and it has salt in it. And when I was here in, I believe it was September, you folks brought up the issue. There are some polluted wells up on Route 9 that have salt in them, and that they are going to be provided with a new source of water. And I thought, well, shoot, I want to get on that list. And I presented my my well water results. The town manager's seen them. Ryan Layton has seen them. And by looking at aerial photographs, they determined that the source of pollution was not off of Davis Street, Blethen Street. My house sits way back from there. I'm like 600 feet in. I will tell you, I'm only a few hundred yards in a straight line as a crow flies from the pile of salt at the Public Works garage. The town manager didn't feel that would be, a source of pollution on my well. And if you look at the town tax map, there's a line drawn on there, and it shows where my property sits on top of one of the the aquifer, a source of water for our town. And I think that that aquifer goes from down my corner where Davis Street is, up like under the Midtown, up under the town garage, up towards the Big Dipper. That's about the size of it, and I'm kind of down on one corner of it. And I mean, there's a source of pollution coming from somewhere. I can't say, I can't tell you exactly where, but that was my guess, my concern. So there is a source of pollution. I went to the water department, and he said that the Ann Street well, which is probably half a mile from my house, also has salt in the well. They're able to get around it by diluting the water from there with the other sources of water that are available in town. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And sure, I'd love to get on the list, on a new source of water supply that was paid by someone other than me. But even, another concern really is that, we may have a source of pollution that isn't being dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll look into those.
I'll look into it, yeah.
Any other audience participation? Okay, seeing none. Next item,
We have no appointments. Next item, Councilor Communications.
Councilor Communications. Any communications, Council? No?
Quiet week.
Quiet.
Good, okay. I see that Public Works is busy again, unfortunately, but they seem to be doing a good job. Everybody's all set, nothing else? Okay, then we'll move on.
Next item is executive session. Order 2010-18 to go into executive session per 1 MRSA Section 405-6A, Personnel Matters, Town Manager's Review.
I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion.
I have a motion from Councilor Palmer. Do I have a second? Second. Councilor Rochelle. All those in favor?
Order passed, 7-0.